The cold winds of Hellasnine moved like ghosts through the ruins of an abandoned mining station. Metal towers that once stood proud now leaned like old bones, covered in frost and loneliness. Silence ruled the place, and no one had walked there for many years. The ground was white with thick snow, and every breath turned into mist in the air. It felt like a planet forgotten by time. Evan, a human scavenger, walked alone through the frozen land. He wore heavy layers of patched thermal gear, his boots thick with ice, his hands tired and sore. His helmet visor showed low oxygen and low temperature warnings, but he was used to these conditions. For him, cold planets were normal. He searched ruins for scrap metal, spare modules, and anything that could be sold for a few credits. That was his life, simple, quiet, and always a little dangerous. He did not search for glory or adventure. He did not dream of big cities or he only cared about surviving another day. But sometimes fate did not care about simple plans. Sometimes fate waited behind old metal doors, ready to change everything. Evan reached the old communication tower. It was large, rusted, and half buried in ice. The door had collapsed years ago, but he managed to squeeze through a gap. Inside, it was dark, only small beams of light entering through broken panels. Dust and frozen wires covered everything. Evan moved carefully, his flashlight shining on consoles and frozen screens. He did not expect anything valuable here. Communication towers usually had nothing left, only dead batteries and broken antennas. Still, he checked out of habit. His boots made soft crunching noises on the icy floor. He reached a console with a cracked glass screen and brushed off the snow with his glove. Then he saw it something impossible. A small red light was blinking dot. Evan frowned, leaned closer, and wiped more snow away. The blinking light was weak, but it was still alive. That meant power. That meant a signal. That meant someone or something had been there recently. His heart beat faster. With frozen fingers, he pressed a few buttons, hoping the ancient system still responded. At first, nothing happened. Then the screen flickered, lines of text appeared, and static filled the small room. The message was simple, short, and chilling: medical distress. Priority 1, passenger critical. Evan's eyes widened. He stood still for several seconds, just staring at the message. A medical distress signal on a dead moon was not normal, and not just any distressed was priority 1. That meant the passenger was not just important, but extremely important. Diplomats, scientists, high-ranking individuals, those kinds of people used priority 1. He scrolled for more information. Another line appeared. Escape pod location. Sector C7. Status: crashed, passenger, unknown, life, signal, weak. Sector C7 was not far, maybe a 30-minute walk through collapsed tunnels and broken corridors. Evan felt a cold shiver down his spine, and not from the weather. He looked around the empty building, the dead screens, the rusted towers, the silent snow outside. He asked himself quietly, who would be here, and why? His brain told him to leave. He had no reason to get involved. Medical distress meant danger, responsibility, and trouble. Someone else's life could become his problem. And out here, problems usually meant death. But then he imagined a person trapped in a broken pod, alone, freezing, maybe dying. He imagined them waiting, hoping someone would come. He imagined their voice fading, their hearts slowing, while the universe continued in silence. Evan closed his eyes for a moment. His breath shook in the cold air. He was not a hero. He was not a soldier. But he knew one simple thing. If someone was alive down there, he could not ignore it. He finally whispered, almost as if talking to himself, "If there's even a chance, I have to try." With that small sentence, he made his decision. He packed light, grabbed his tools, checked his oxygen, and left the tower. The wind hit him hard outside, but he did not stop. His boots crushed through snow as he headed toward Sector C7. Guided by his scanner, he did not know what waited for him in those tunnels. He did not know what kind of person was inside that escape pod. He did not know how his simple choice would change everything. All he knew was that somewhere under the ice, somewhere in the broken heart of the mining station, a blinking beacon was waiting, and a life was fading. And for the first time in a long time, Evan felt something more than survival. He felt purpose. Evan moved through the frozen tunnels toward Sector C7, his breath coming in sharp clouds that disappeared into the dark. The walls were cracked and bent from long-ago collapses. Snow and ice had filled some passages, and the air smelled metallic and stale. Every step was careful. The ground was uneven, and a single misstep could send him sliding into a hole or trap him beneath fallen beams. Yet he did not slow down. That faint blinking beacon had become a heartbeat in his mind. Someone was alive, and he would not leave them behind. After what felt like an hour, he finally saw it. A twisted escape pod, half buried in snow and rubble. Its surface was scratched, smoke curled from broken vents, and the lights inside flickered weakly. Evan's heart pounded so hard that he felt it in his throat. He took a deep breath, pushing down the cold fear crawling up his spine. Carefully, he pulled away chunks of ice and bent metal, making a path to the pod's entrance. Inside, the figure was small, slumped, and still. Evan froze. He had expected a human, a survivor from another outpost, but this was different. The skin was pale blue, almost glowing faintly in the pod's dying light. Her hair was silver white, tangled with frost and dust. Even in her weak state, her posture held grace and dignity. Gold patterns embroidered her clothing, faintly shimmering in the light. On her collar, a small crown-shaped emblem glimmered faintly. Evan's chest tightened. He crouched beside her and checked for a pulse. Weak, but it was there. Shallow, fragile, but still alive. Her eyes fluttered open, silver grey and hazy, looking straight at him. She tried to speak, but only a soft, hoarse whisper emerged. "Please. Help." Evan felt a lump in his throat. He had seen desperation before, countless times, but nothing like this. Nothing that carried the weight of nobility and fear mixed together. He had never saved someone so fragile, someone so important. He gently lifted her from the pod, careful of broken metal and jagged ice. She shivered violently in the cold air, and he wrapped her in his thermal blanket. "You're going to be okay," he said softly, more to convince himself than her. Her lips moved slightly, forming words in a language she did not know. Yet her tone was clear. Trust, hope, and fear all mixed into one fragile sound. Evan scanned the area quickly. The tunnels were silent, but silence on Heli's 9 was dangerous. Any sound could bring trouble. "Can you stand?" he asked. She shook her head, her breath shallow. He realized the truth. She could not move without help. Her injuries were severe, probably life. Evan had only basic supplies: cutters, a thermal blanket, a first aid kit barely adequate for human injuries. For her, he had no idea what to do. "It's okay," he whispered. "Just hold on. I'll get you out of here." She blinked at him again. Then, weakly, she whispered one word he understood: "Evan." Her voice was faint but real. He froze, startled that she knew his name, or perhaps he had read it on some display in the pod. "You're a princess?" he asked cautiously. She gave a faint nod, her silver hair falling over her eyes. "Princess Ariel Lysari." The weight of the words hit him like a cold hammer. Lysari, the high, untouchable alien species he had only read about in star charts and news broadcasts. Humans rarely met them. They were elegant, aloof, and powerful. They treated humans as fragile and feeble, often refusing contact. And here she was, lying injured, alone, in his arms. Evan's chest tightened. The cold tunnels, the falling snow outside, the distant howling wind, it all seemed to fade. Only her heartbeat mattered now, weak, faint, and fragile, but alive. "You're going to live," he said firmly, even though he was unsure how. "I'll make sure of it." She looked at him then, her eyes filled with something more than fear, gratitude, hope, and trust. He had never felt so responsible for another life. And yet, strangely, he did not feel fear for himself, only purpose, only the drive to keep her alive, no matter the cost. Evan knew the journey out would be dangerous. Hellas 9 was not forgiving, and the tunnels could collapse at any moment. There could be creatures, scavengers, or worse, waiting in the dark. But as he lifted her carefully into his arms and started walking again, he made a silent promise to the princess. "I will not let you die. Not here, not now, not ever." The snow and cold tried to slow him, but he pushed forward. Every step echoed in the tunnels like a heartbeat, carrying the fragile life of a princess and the stubborn determination of a human scavenger. Somewhere above the frozen surface, the stars waited. Somewhere beyond the tunnels, hope waited. And for Evan, purpose had finally found him. Evan carried Princess Ariel through the frozen tunnels, each step slower than the last. Her small body was fragile in his arms, shivering under the heavy thermal blanket. The harsh wind from cracks in the tunnel walls seemed to pierce through everything, and his gloves were stiff with ice. Every noise echoed unnaturally, rocks falling, metal groaning, the faint creak of the pod he had just escaped. But nothing mattered more than keeping her alive. He reached a narrow passage leading up to the surface. Outside, the snowstorm had quieted, leaving a grey-white world stretching endlessly. In the distance, the faint outline of a small shuttle station glimmered under weak sun rays. That station could be their salvation. Maybe a human base could patch her up, or at least keep her warm. Evan tapped into his communicator and sent a distress signal to the nearest human outpost. Static filled the small device, then a cold voice replied, "Human scavenger, identify yourself." "State the situation." He quickly told them who he was, where he was, and that a critically injured alien passenger needed help. For a moment, the line was silent. Then the voice spoke, again more urgent, sharper, alien species. "Passenger priority." Evan hesitated, knowing the words would change everything. "Yes, she's a princess. Lazari, injured, critical condition." There was silence on the line, and the air felt heavier. Then the communicator crackled again. This time, the voice was formal, cold, almost like it had no emotion at all. Human, do you understand what you are saying? A Lysari princess has strict laws. Her life is not simply her own. If you interfere, you must declare your demands for compensation. Evan frowned. Compensation. He had not thought about money or power or politics. He only wanted her to live. I'm not asking for anything. I just want to save her life, he said, voice firm. The line was silent for a long, tense moment. Then the voice spoke again, slow and deliberate. To save a royal life without prior agreement is a debt of honor. The rescuer must state a price or accept the consequences. Evan froze. He did not understand. Consequences. Debt of honor. The words made his stomach tighten. This was not just a princess needing help. This was a galaxy where every action had a price, and now the price was his. He looked down at Ariel. Her blue skin glimmered faintly in the weak sunlight, and her eyes fluttered open. She seemed to sense his fear. Evan. What do they want? She whispered, her voice trembling. I don't know, he admitted. They're saying, if I save you, I will owe them something. Something big. Something I can't imagine. Ariel's gaze widened, and she weakly reached toward him. Her silver-white hair fell over her face. Evan, if you save me, my empire will owe you anything, even war, even power, even your life. Evan's heart skipped. The weight of her words crushed him, even as his arms tightened around her. She was not exaggerating. The Lysari were a species that valued honor above all else. If he rescued her, the universe itself might shift in ways he could never predict. For a moment, he considered letting go. Walking away would be easier, safer. He could survive. He could live another day without debts or obligations that might destroy him. He could leave her to fate, but he looked down at her pale, shivering form, and his decision was made. Fear could not control him. He could not abandon a life in need not when it was in his hands. I don't care about their rules, he said quietly, almost to himself. I don't care about debts or honor. I just want you to live. Ariel's eyes filled with tears, though her face was pale and weak. She whispered, barely audible, humans, you are impossible. Evan smiled faintly, though his lips were stiff from cold and tension. We get called that a lot, he replied. Then the communicator crackled again. The Lysari voice was sharper now, almost impressed. Human. Your answer is unexpected. You understand the consequences of your choice. Evan did not hesitate. He looked at Ariel, at her fragile body, at the faint pulse beneath her skin, and he whispered with all the certainty he could muster, I understand, and I still choose to save her. The line went silent again. Outside, the wind blew across the ice, carrying the faint sound of metal groaning in distant tunnels. But for the first time, Evan did not feel fear, only resolve, only purpose. Somewhere deep in the tunnels, beneath the snow and ice, a decision had been made. A life would be saved, and the cost would be a debt beyond imagining. But Evan did not care. He had already decided. Some things were more important than fear, more important than safety, more important than the universe itself. A life was worth saving, and he would save it, no matter the price. The frozen tunnels seemed quieter now, but the silence felt heavy, almost unnatural. Evan carried Princess Ariel carefully, each step slow and deliberate. Her small body was so fragile in his arms that he feared even a single misstep might break her. The cold air cut through his gloves and jacket, but he did not notice. Every sense was focused on her weak pulse, her shallow breathing, the faint glow of her skin in the dim light of the tunnels. He had almost reached the outer exit when a sound made him freeze a sharp, mechanical hum that did not belong to the wind. He stopped, straining to hear. Then came the faint crunch of boots on ice, distant but purposeful. Evan's heart skipped a beat. He had hoped the tunnels were empty. He had hoped no one else had come. But now he knew they were not alone. What? Who's there? He whispered, pressing Ariel closer to his chest. Her silver eyes opened slightly, and she gasped, recognizing the sound. Not Lysari. Assassins? They caused the crash. She breathed, her voice trembling. Evan's stomach sank. He had expected danger from the cold, the ruins, maybe even wild creatures, but assassins. That changed everything. Their intent was clear. She had to die. His blood ran cold, but he forced himself to stay calm. Fear would not save her. Only action could. He scanned the narrow passage, looking for cover, anything that could give them a chance. There were broken crates, collapsed beams, and ice-covered machinery. Enough to hide, maybe even fight. He gently laid Ariel behind a half-fallen metal container and checked his rifle. The gun had limited charges, but it would have to do. His other hand gripped a metal pipe, heavy and solid, a weapon for close combat. The assassins entered the tunnel, their footsteps deliberate and synchronized. Their voices were low and harsh, a language Evan did not know, but the tone was unmistakable, ruthless, calculating, lethal. They scanned the tunnel carefully, unaware of Evan and Ariel's exact position. Stay still. Don't make a sound, Evan whispered to her. Ariel nodded weakly, her hand barely touching his arm as if she could feel his determination. Evan's heart twisted. She was a princess, a figure of power, and yet here she was, scared and helpless. And he, just a human scavenger, was all that stood between her and death. The first assassin rounded the corner. Evan took a deep breath, aimed, and fired. The shot rang loudly, echoing through the tunnels, and the figure fell. His pulse raced. He had never killed anyone before, not like this. But he could not hesitate. Hesitation would mean her death. The second assassin reacted quickly, pulling a blade from a sheath and lunging toward Ariel. Evan slammed his rifle into the attacker's shoulder, then swung the metal pipe with all his strength. The assassin crashed into the wall with a grunt. Evan's muscles burned, his arms ached, but he did not stop. Every motion was fueled by a single purpose: keep her alive. The third attacker was faster. He moved toward, Ariel eyes glinting with malice. Evan shoved her behind him and took the hit on his own arm. Pain exploded through him, sharp and fiery, but he did not scream. He only gritted his teeth, swinging the pipe again, hitting the assassin in the chest. The figure fell back, stunned. Arielle gasped, her hand trembling as she touched Evan's shoulder. You're human, she whispered, her voice filled with awe. Evan's lips curved into a pained smile. We get that a lot, he said, even as blood ran down his arm. The remaining assassins hesitated. They had not expected the human to fight like this, wild, unpredictable, fearless in the face of overwhelming odds. And they were right. Humans were terrifying when cornered. They were stubborn, relentless, and In moments like this, unstoppable, Evan pressed forward, his mind clear despite the pain. One by one, he forced the attackers back, using every ounce of strength and ingenuity he had. His focus never left Ariel. Every swing, every shot, every shove was for her survival. When the last assassin fell, the tunnels were silent once more. Only the soft hum of the cold wind filled the air, and Ariel's shallow breathing. Evan knelt beside her, wiping blood from his arm with his sleeve. "It's over. You're safe," he whispered. She looked at him with wide eyes, amazement and gratitude shining through the pain. "Humans. You are impossible," she said softly. Evan smiled faintly, exhaustion catching up to him. "Impossible," he said. "Maybe, but I promise to keep you alive. And I always keep my promises." For a moment, the frozen tunnels seemed warmer. Not because of the sun outside, not because of the fight behind them, but because of the bond formed in fear, trust, and survival. A human scavenger had faced death for a princess, and in that moment, nothing else mattered outside. The grey light of Hellas 9 continued to stretch endlessly, indifferent to what had just happened. But inside the tunnels, a single life had been saved, and a human had proven, once again, that courage was the most dangerous and unstoppable force in the universe. The tunnel was quiet now, but Evan knew it could not last. Every sound he had heard, the wind, the distant groan of ice, the echo of footsteps reminded him that Hellas 9 did not forgive mistakes. He carried Princess Ariel carefully, each step slow and deliberate, making sure her fragile body did not jolt or shake. Her breathing was shallow and her eyes half closed, but she clung to consciousness. "You're going to be okay," Evan whispered, as if saying it enough times could make it true. She lifted a trembling hand to his arm, her touch faint but warm against the cold. I thought I would die here," she said weakly. Evan shook his head. "Not on my watch. Not here. Not now." His voice was firm, carrying a quiet strength that even he did not realize he had. In that moment, he was not a scavenger. He was a guardian, a protector, the last hope for a life that mattered more than anything in his universe. The tunnels opened to a wider chamber, where the remnants of old machinery lay scattered. Evan dragged Ariel toward a comms console he had spotted earlier, half buried under frost and ice. The console was ancient, with cracked screens and frayed wires, but he had repaired worse with less. He flipped switches, jiggled cables, and muttered to himself, trying to get the system alive. Sparks flew and the screen flickered, then stabilized. "Got it," he breathed, relief washing over him. He typed in coordinates and sent a distress signal to the orbiting Lasari medical ship. Within moments, the response came. Crystal clear and impossibly formal. "Human. Identify your location and the condition of the princess." Evan's fingers moved quickly over the controls. Princess Ariel Lasari. Injured. Critical. Life signs weak but present. Require immediate extraction. There was a pause. Then the voice returned, sharper now. "Human, do you understand the consequences of your actions? You have interfered in matters of royal life. Rescue protocol requires your demands or acceptance of the debt of honor." Evan froze, the words sinking in like ice in his chest. A debt of honor. Consequences. He looked down at Ariel, at her fragile form, at her faint pulse. The universe suddenly felt much larger, much more dangerous, and much more complicated than a single frozen tunnel. I don't care about their rules, he whispered. I just want her to live. Ariel's eyes fluttered open, filled with astonishment. Her lips curved into a faint, trembling smile. Humans, you are. Impossible, she whispered, a mixture of awe and disbelief in her voice. Before he could respond, the distant sound of engines and landing thrusters vibrated through the ground. The Lysari medical ship had arrived. Its sleek, silver hull gleamed faintly through the tunnel's narrow exit, and armored medics rushed forward, scanning the area as they approached. Evan placed Ariel gently on a stretcher they brought, making sure she was secure. One of the medics knelt, checking her vitals. The soft glow of their medical equipment contrasted with the cold, harsh light of Hellas 9, and for a moment, the princess was safe. She survived, the medic said quietly, almost to himself. Evan allowed himself a moment to breathe, though his arm throbbed with pain from the fight. Blood had soaked through his sleeve, and bruises burned across his chest and back. He ignored it all, focusing only on her survival. Ariel reached out weakly, her hand brushing his. You didn't have to do this, she whispered. I did, he replied simply. You were alive. That was enough. The medics lifted Ariel into the ship's interior, and Evan followed, watching the princess for any sign of distress. He helped secure her onto the medical bed, adjusting blankets and checking monitors. As the ship's engines powered up, lifting them above the icy surface, Evan finally allowed himself to relax slightly. The danger of the tunnels was gone. For now, but he could feel it, the weight of what he had done. The knowledge that saving a life like hers came with a price far beyond money, far beyond human understanding. Somewhere in the stars, the Lysari Empire now owed him a debt he could not measure, a promise that could change the course of history. Ariel opened her eyes, looking directly at him. Weak, pale, but alive, she whispered. You've saved me, and yet, the universe will change because of this. Evan smiled faintly, pain and exhaustion mingling in his expression. I don't care about the universe. I care about you. That's enough for me. As the medical ship lifted into the sky, leaving Hellas 9's frozen wastelands behind, Evan realized something profound. Sometimes courage did not come from weapons, training, or strength. Sometimes courage came from the simple, stubborn decision to save a life, no matter the price. And for Princess Ariel Lysari, that decision would not only mean survival, it would mean hope, trust, and the beginning of something neither human nor Lysari had ever expected. Evan wiped the blood from his arm and looked at the stars ahead. Somewhere, far above them, a debt of honor waited. But for now, he only thought of the fragile form lying before him. The life he had saved, and the promise he had made. I will not let you die, not ever. The hum of the Lysari medical ship filled the air, steady and mechanical, but it could not drown out the weight pressing on Evan's chest. He had saved Princess Ariel, yes, but the words from the Lysari officer echoed relentlessly in his mind. The debt must be fulfilled, a debt of honor from a royal empire, something no human had ever faced. The scale of it was impossible. He had no idea what the cost would be. It could mean riches, planets, power, or war. Evan sat beside Ariel as the medics worked. Her breathing was steady now, her pulse stronger, but her eyes were still heavy with weakness. She reached a trembling hand to touch his arm, and for a brief moment, the world outside the empire, the debt, the unknown consequences faded away, Evan, she whispered softly, I don't know what they will ask. But if you refuse, the universe might punish you. He shook his head, trying to ignore the fear creeping in. I'm not thinking about them. I'm thinking about you. That's all that matters. Ariel smiled faintly, a fragile beam in the sterile light of the medical pod. Humans, you are. Impossible, she murmured, echoing her words from the tunnel. Evan chuckled softly, though it was strained. We get called that a lot, he said, brushing the hair from her face. But his laughter died quickly as the Lasari officer appeared on the medical display, perfectly composed, formal, and intimidating. Human, the officer said, voice precise and cold. Princess Ariel owes you her life. The debt must be stated, or consequences will follow. Do you understand? Evan felt the weight of those words settle like a stone in his stomach. He had thought saving her was the hardest part. But this was something else entirely. The empire he had just saved could demand anything. Entire worlds, resources, even bloodshed in their name. He clenched his fists. I don't want anything, he said at first, almost instinctively. I only wanted her to live. The officer's eyes narrowed. To refuse the debt is unacceptable. You interfere with royal affairs. The debt must be acknowledged, named, and fulfilled. Otherwise, you risk punishment by the Empire itself. Evan's jaw tightened. He looked at Ariel, lying pale and weak but alive. Her hand rested against his arm, almost impossibly small compared to the weight of the galaxy's expectations. He realized then that he had a choice, and it was the most human choice he could make. Selflessness, then. My choice is simple, he said finally, voice firm. The only thing I ask is that she lives. That's it. Nothing else. No power, no money, no empire, just her life. The silence was deafening. Even the soft hum of the ship seemed to pause. Ariel's eyes widened, shimmering with tears. She could barely speak. Evan, you are human, she whispered, disbelief and awe in her voice. The officer's expression shifted subtly. Shock, confusion, respect, hard to tell. You ask the price of a king and offer nothing in return, the officer said slowly. You are either a fool or something rarer, a human of exceptional character. Evan shrugged, though his arm throbbed from old injuries. I'm just someone who doesn't leave lives behind, he said simply. If someone is alive, I don't walk away. Ariel's lips curved into a faint, grateful smile, and she whispered, You are impossible. And yet, perfect. Evan looked at her, and for the first time, he realized what being human truly meant. Strength was not in weapons or technology. Power was not in fleets or armies. The greatest strength was in courage, compassion, and the stubborn refusal to abandon a life in need. He had faced impossible odds in the tunnels, against attackers and the freezing cold. But the real impossible challenge was moral, to act selflessly when the universe demanded a price, and he had done it. The officer finally spoke again, voice softer now. Your choice is accepted. The debt will be honored. No retaliation, no punishment. The princess's life and your courage will be remembered throughout the empire. Ariel's eyes filled with tears. She tried to speak, but only managed a whisper. Thank you for everything, for not asking for the stars, for not asking for anything at all. Evan smiled faintly. You're alive. That's enough for me. Outside the med pod, the The stars of Hellas 9 shone cold and distant. But inside, in a small cabin on a Lysari ship, hope had been forged. Humanity's greatest power was not in their technology, not in their fleets, not in their weapons. It was in the impossible courage to save another life. Without expecting reward, without asking for glory, without fearing the cost, Ariel drifted into a more peaceful sleep as the medics monitored her vitals. Evan stayed beside her, watching, protecting, and quietly realizing that his simple act of selflessness had shifted the balance of the galaxy in ways no one could yet understand. For a human scavenger on a frozen moon, he had become a hero not through skill, not through power, but through the extraordinary courage to do what any life demanded, to protect it, no matter the price, and the universe. Silent and vast outside the ship would never forget.